The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario Bros. Are two of the biggest franchises Nintendo owns, and both of them are titans in the video game industry. However, when you look at these two games, they seem to be extremely similar to each other when it comes to the game's design. And that's what we're going to look at today. Alright, these two Nintendo masterpieces were born around the same time. The first Mario game arrived in 1985, and for Zelda this was 1987. They were some of the first games Nintendo themselves released for their home console, the NES, and kickstarted their console and game-making department. Before that time period, they mostly worked on arcade machines, but this development would be a huge step for the company. However, these first franchises that they made for their first home console are extremely similar, and today we're going to completely analyze them. Now, there are a couple of points that we're going to look at and compare to each other. Story, levels, and gameplay. Because there are some clear parallels in these departments that most of you probably never noticed. First up, the actual events. In the Super Mario series, the main villain is Bowser that kidnaps Peach time and time again, and Mario, the hero, needs to save her. Quite a basic story that's repeated over and over again. However, with some slight changes here and there. Now for the Zelda series. Here the main villain is Ganondorf, who either steals the Triforce, kidnaps Zelda, or both. And Link, the hero, needs to save her and the land in general. It's clear to almost everyone that these two games, when it comes to the story, are extremely similar to each other. However, it goes a lot deeper than this, because even the power sources of both worlds are extremely similar, and there's always a battle to obtain them. In The Legend of Zelda, this is the Triforce, and in the Mario series, it's the Power Star and all the similar versions of it. They play a huge role, and in both games you're constantly busy with either protecting or collecting them. There are even a lot of similarities between the characters like Bowser and Ganondorf, who are similar in multiple ways, for example their hair. Ganondorf can even go into his beast form, making them both look and act like savage animals, especially if Bowser becomes huge. And others like Princess Peach and Zelda, who essentially have the same role. They even help the player to an extent. Besides that, both Link and Mario have the same personality and role. The silent protagonist you can project yourself onto. The only thing they say are some basic catchphrases and screams. Even their companions were essentially born from the same idea. Shigeru Miyamoto has stated in interviews that he wanted Mario to ride a horse after the completion of Super Mario Bros. Technical limitations on the NES kept this from being possible, but with the development of the Super Famicom, an animal partner for Mario could be supported. This became the character Yoshi, who played a huge role in Super Mario World. However, he is not a horse. That's because the original idea was moved and ended up becoming Epona, Link's way of getting around Hyrule. So even ideas and concepts are shared between the two franchises, and there's a lot more examples besides these ones. However, what about the levels and the overall structure of it? Well, for this we will look at both 2D and 3D games. The Super Mario series has either a 2D side-scrolling format or a 3D more open-world layout when it comes to the levels, while the Zelda franchise tends to go for a 2D top-down open world and 3D open world. However, the 3D ones tend to be more linear than the Mario games. Now, some aspects are seen in both games, like enemies, characters in levels, and even the 2D side-scroller style is seen multiple times in the Zelda series. Besides that, the structure of the Mario games and Zelda games in both formats are similar to an extent. It usually starts off with some smaller and more normal objectives, like clearing platforming levels, doing a special task, or any other challenges. By doing this, you will work your way to the big level, mission, or dungeon, where you have to go through and defeat a boss at the end. This is the basic layout of almost any Zelda and Mario game when it comes to the levels and the objectives. In the 2D Mario games, you first go through some levels, so you can get to the castle, defeat the boss, and go to the next section. The same is seen in the 3D games, where you have to clear a couple of missions in a lot of the worlds in order to unlock the final level, boss, and new section of the world. Super Mario 64 is a good example of this. Now, this format is also seen in the Legend of Zelda series, where the final level is a dungeon, also with a boss at the end. The biggest difference between the two is yet again the setting and the theme, but the overall layout of events is extremely similar. However, the 2D Mario games are a lot more linear than the Zelda version. This is not the case for the 3D games though. Here, both of them are extremely open and you unlock parts of the world bit by bit in an overall similar manner. Clearly, the base layout of the two franchises are alike, especially in the 3D games, but what about the gameplay? Well, here there are a lot of similarities because both games essentially use the same 4 things to challenge the player and keep them busy. Number 1. Puzzles. Both the Zelda and Mario games use this to create a solvable problem with a reward at the end. This could be a new item, power-up, or way forward. Think of the ice block puzzle seen in The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, or the mysterious Hotel Delfino episode in Super Mario Sunshine. Now, Zelda uses this aspect a lot more, mostly because it focuses heavily on this. It's filled to the brim with puzzles. However, the Mario games certainly have them as well, even in the 2D games like Super Mario World. Sure, the types of puzzles are different, but that's mostly because of the clear themes of both games. Now for number 2, the enemies. This kind of speaks for itself. The Goombas, Koopa Troopas, and Moblins that are in your way and you need to take them out. Now in the Zelda series, there is a huge focus on this aspect when it comes to the normal ones and bosses. There's even a button for locking onto them. However, in the Mario series, the regular enemies can be ignored and they're not that important really. Bosses are a completely different story though. In both games, there's a huge focus on them with all kinds of different tactics, powers, and items needed to defeat them. The Zelda series usually introduces a new permanent item that you need to use to defeat a boss. While in the Mario series you have your basic abilities, however you have power-ups in those games which also have an influence. Now for number 3. Platforming. This is Mario's main focus. It's known as a platformer after all, and the amount of movement options that you have in those games is insane. Every level, world, and section of those games have platforming in them. That's their main focus, just like puzzles and combat for Zelda. However, our lovely Hyrulean Link also does some jumping. Just look at the swamp in Majora's Mask with all the lily pads. Another good example is the pirate ship from Wind Waker, and in Link's Awakening there are even actual 2D side-scrolling platforming sections with Goombas included. Sure, the platforming in the Zelda games is overall different, but they're still there, and more than everyone realizes. Now for our last one. Number 4. Secrets. Both worlds are filled to the brim with secrets and hidden things. For example, in Zelda, think of the treasure chests, caves, and even dungeon sections, and there are even items made for finding them like the Lens of Truth. The world of Zelda especially focuses on this, and Shigeru Miyamoto came up with the concept of the game by finding secret things in real life. He said the following: "When I was a child, I went hiking and found a lake. It was quite a surprise for me to stumble upon it. When I traveled around the country without a map trying to find my way, stumbling upon amazing things as I went, I realized how it felt to go on an adventure like this." Stuff like this inspired him to make the Legend of Zelda franchise. So clearly, adventure and finding all kinds of small things is a big aspect of the game. However, this also goes for the Super Mario series surprisingly enough. Think of the hidden warp pipes from the first game that you could use to skip certain sections. Another good example is the secret levels that we see in Super Mario Sunshine that changes the game completely. And the recorder from Super Mario Bros. 3 is another great example of a hidden and special item that holds a lot of power. Clearly, secrets are an important aspect in both games. They are found in a ton of areas, big and small. Now after this long journey, we can say that there are a ton of things the same or at least similar in both franchises. Which is quite logical since they were created by the same man in the same time period. The difference is the focus. Now are the Mario and Zelda series exactly the same? No, of course not! There are a ton of differences. Super Mario Odyssey and Zelda Breath of the Wild are great examples of the game evolving and becoming different. However, especially in the older games, the big outlines of the games are similar in a lot of ways. So as you can see, the Italian Mustachio Man and Hyrulean Forest Imp aren't so different after all. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. I had a pretty okay weekend. I was very tired afterwards because I did a lot of things and I almost broke my chin because I tried to lift a huge log because we were cutting wood. And I lifted it, and it and like the momentum changed, and it swinged up, and it hit my jaw, and I almost broke my jaw. It was great. Please subscribe so I can buy a new jaw.